Let me begin with a simple piece of advice. BURGGEIST is a game that works best by having no prior knowledge of it. That makes it a hard sell nowadays, so allow me one brief description. If you enjoy the ever-elusive existence of the real-time action strategy genre, where you play the role of the commander who simultaneously takes personal action against the opposing forces, all embroiled in a rich world of exceptional fantasy, I would strongly recommend you to play BURGGEIST with that knowledge alone. Even if you get it with the intent of seeing all it has to offer, it's possible to wrap it all up just before it hits the 2-digit mark, while still providing an excellent full-course journey, which is something that many RPGs fail to achieve even in their 50 to 100 hours of content. If this is still not enough to convince you, I should end this forward by stating that BURGGEIST is now my game of the year. Definitely an interesting turn of events, especially when 9 Souls held the guaranteed spot for the better part of the year. They are both special games that are worth of your time and attention, and the only reason that BURGGEIST wins in the end is because it brings back a long-forgotten subgenre with such a creative passion that it's hard to stop thinking about it, even days after having finished it. For a more elaborate method of persuasion, I shall structure this video into distinct layers, starting with a general synopsis before jumping into the complete breakdown of the web and flow of the game, ultimately closing down with an extensive look into the story and the world that encompasses it, as I believe it to be a real strong point in its favor, despite the core gameplay also being incredibly engaging. This way, if I am able to hook you at any point, you are free to stop watching and play it for yourself, while still maintaining some of the mystery behind it. Let's not dwell any further and finally jump into the incredible world of BURGGEIST. Another victim to the recurring cruelty of life, Ignace finds himself forced to build a tower reaching 5,000 Norans to break off the petrification curse on his wife Lucille. For this, he departs to the no-man's land of Aliscans, where an inexplicable force called the Abhorrers find their purpose on actively trying to stop the creation of such artificial structures. To counteract such unrelenting opposition, he employs the use of the massive entity only known as the BURGGEIST, a walking fortress equipped with powerful armaments of destruction, all for him to command. Explore Aliscans and find a befitting place for your magnum opus as you fight against the never-ending waves of Abhorrers, together with the BURGGEIST and your own powers of Geromantia. By now you must have realized how it's nothing short of an Herculean task to talk about BURGGEIST without drawing comparisons to a plethora of different titles that appear to have inspired its rich composition. With just a cursory glance, you're likely to recall the acclaimed works of Fumito Ueda such as Ico and Shadow of the Colossus. Perhaps you might even find some of Tsutomu Nie in it too, considering the stilted way the characters act within themselves and the sheer scale of the world in contrast with its human elements. By checking the brunt of the gameplay, you might even remember that brutal legend is something that exists, but if you are a real freak, then you can even draw a connection to the early 2000s cult classic Giants, Citizen Kabuto. By admiring its choice of art direction, you should be able to see a similar use of light and color to the 2011's action game El Shaddai, while also sharing a similar scope in storytelling when it comes to the struggles of mankind in an hostile world of biblical proportions. By exploring the world and learning its history through the few denizens still present in its forsaken land, you should be able to recognize the Nier-esque narrative composition that captivated so many with the sprawling and intricate story of a miserable, decaying universe. What I'm personally surprised to see is the application of the complex nature of advanced mathematics as a system for technology-based magic, which strongly reminds me of, but now is not the right time for that. Even if all of these presumptions turn out to be senseless, what's important is how it all comes together, and Tatsumi Banai, being the sole developer behind BURGGEIST, shows a level of creative passion and dedication to his work that only deserves my utmost respect. The fact that the game is entirely voiced not just in Japanese, but also the fictional language of Kargrish, should be enough to establish the level of commitment to the artistic vision and love for the craft. The same could be said of the wonderful soundtrack composed by Shigeru Yorisaki, which reserves itself for special moments, as normally during exploration, the game gives the necessary space for the player to take in their surroundings through the serene sounds of nature. Of course, the game is not without its problems, but they are no more than slightly inconveniences. Like how the BURGGEIST sometimes gets stuck on the terrain, or how quickly things can escalate when you're trying to issue commands, but the screen is entirely covered with explosions. You might also be of the opinion that the game could look better, but honestly, I love everything about it. From the way that some of the models have their textures wrapped around so haphazardly, to the absolute chaotic topography of the world, which ends up being used as a way to build a world through its past events and further drive the depth of the story. Now look at the designs on the menu. The subtle animation on each one gives them so much personality that I couldn't help but watch them play out from time to time. I really wasn't expecting to see two Eastern games released so close to each other, which heavily based their art direction on such strong classical Western influences. This level of attention to detail also carries over to the other aspects, of course. Like, for example, sometimes you are exploring some random part of the map that might not be important, but it's filled with all of these unique little details that add so much to the world. Like finding an empty bottle next to a bench, facing an incredible vista. There's no need for an interactable where the protagonist comments over what it is because it's immediately obvious, while at the same time leaving enough space for the player to think about and figure out the details for themselves. This type of vague design is present throughout the entire game, and because that might filter some players in the beginning, I shall take the opportunity to share some starting tips to help out on how to tackle the game. To start, you can only build towers in preset locations around the world, but they're all marked with bright white pillars of light in the distance, so don't worry about missing them. Although construction can be started at any time, it's important to know that each location has a set difficulty level, which can be seen when you get close to the construction zone. For your first attempt, I would recommend the one just north of the starting point, in the forest. Try to build that tower just above 1000 Norrens, and you might get something that will help you further understand what you should be doing to more easily reach the final objective. For the last hint, I would recommend checking the shop at the starting point to buy the Flame Tauros Gyromantia as fast as possible, because it's a crucial tool for exploring, which is also something I highly recommend doing. This should be enough to get you on the right track for how the rest of the game works, so just remember that if you ever get stuck, feeling that you're not making any progress, try to explore further by using your newfound knowledge. With the general overview done, how does the game really work? For a more comprehensible explanation, one can easily divide the gameplay into distinct segments, exploration and combat. So let's begin by taking a look into the combat and how the titular Colossus works as your main weapon. Commanding the BURGGEIST is all a matter of pointing at something and pressing the corresponding key to order to attack. Should you point to something other than a target, it will continuously fire into the area until further orders. From that, you can also expand or contract the area of impact to cover more ground or concentrate the line of fire into an absolute zone of death. As for the movement, you can point where you want it to go, stop where it currently is, or have it follow behind you. Positioning is absolutely important here, as the main gimmick of the game is how all of the artillery is affected by height. This means that shots taken from higher than the target do more damage than those taken at the same terrain level. When you start building a tower, it's your job to quickly scout your surroundings to establish a defense strategy according to the current enemy advances. The tower will build automatically unless there's a trumpeter present in the field, which appears not only to block your progress, but also to increase the enemy attack power, so taking care of them should be your highest priority. These can be counted as bosses, as by the time you defeat them you should be able to stop the tower's construction, causing all the enemies to disappear instantly. The problem here is that trumpeters will always spawn really far away, so during the last waves where the BURGGEIST is busy dealing with defending the tower, you must solve this problem by your own hands. This is a good opportunity to introduce the Gyromantia, a technique used by Ignis which for this moment I shall crudely summarize it as being this world's system of magic. You start with a simple fireball. Unlike the armaments on the BURGGEIST, this is also affected by the same artillery laws. This means that you need to quickly traverse the world for vantage points to more easily issue your orders and for your gyromantia to deal more damage. With the basics explained, I can show you the exact moment where BURGGEIST became the game of the year. Throwing fireballs might be pretty cool, but it's also pretty slow, so while I was in the heat of the action, without even thinking if I could, I tried to throw a fireball in the air, because hey, maybe I could cancel the animation and accelerate my rate of fire, only to end up doing this. Holy shit, I'm literally chaos dunking. Is this the power of fighting for your sick wife? Imagine you start Silent Hill 2 and James is like,
I got a letter. The name on the envelope said Mary. Mary died of that damn disease 3 years ago.
but my 3-point score is the best of the season, so fuck it, we're ballin'! The chaos during combat escalates really quickly, so during the final stages, you'll be sprinting everywhere, floating across the sky to update the ballistics for new enemy paths, while taking advantage of the height to literally dunk on all of those who oppose you. What I'm trying to convey here is that all of this gets together to make something fucking awesome. Just be careful to not run out of energy, otherwise you'll have to wait to regenerate by itself, or be forced to run as fast as you can to the nearest angel statue for a quick refill. Should you successfully clear the enemy wave and temporarily cease construction, you gain some experience and erratic lime, which is the game's main form of currency. Experience should be self-explanatory. You use it to permanently obtain and upgrade skills, be it in personal abilities or the tower's defenses. Of course, one of them is how much damage you do with the gyromantia, so it shouldn't be even a question of where to invest your points. We're definitely maxing out those dunks. On the other hand, erratic lime can be used to strengthen your tower, enhance the armaments on your BURGGEIST, or buy things at the shop. These are all really important, as the difficulty of the enemy attacks escalates surprisingly fast, so if you aren't fully prepared, they will for certain destroy all of your work. Should the Abhorrer successfully destroy the tower, it is gone for good and you must start from the bottom again. Even then, don't lose heart, as you only drop one level on each of the tower's upgrades, so it's not a complete loss of progress. This should help you realize that you're not supposed to force yourself into building just one tower. When you think that you're not able to clear the next stage of construction, you should continue exploring and try your hand at another location, as with each attempt, you gather more experience and erratic lime to strengthen yourself for future challenges. While the world might seem incredibly vast, you don't have to worry about having to go back and forth repeatedly, because you can use special locations and your own built towers as fast travel points, which further incentivize trying each available tower spot so you can decide which one you'll ultimately rise to the skies. Exploring is not just used for tower scouting, as there are a lot of other trinkets scattered throughout. Things such as the HL polyhedrons, which are natural rock clusters that you can break for extra erratic lime. These come in all sorts of shapes, which tell you if you can break them or not. The greater the number of polyhedral faces, the harder they are to break. While it's not very clear at first, you must pass a certain damage threshold in a certain amount of time, or they just won't break. These are also divided into two distinct colors, with the white ones being weak to all types of damage, while the purple ones can only be damaged by your own gyromantia. There are also the extremely rare golden polyhedrons, but these only give you a larger amount of erratic lime, so don't worry if you can't break them when you stumble upon one. Also present are the Batomats, which are classical mythological creatures, shaped like sheep that grow from plants. And in here, they float up high when you approach them, allowing you to get some extra erratic lime if you manage to catch them. All of these work as short puzzles to teach you how to interact with the environment, as you figure out a way to reach a Baromat or getting enough altitude for the extra damage needed to break a polyhedron. All of these respawn over time, so there's no need to worry about collecting every single one of them. You can even use the BURGGEIST as a platform, which helps getting the extra height that you might need to break a polyhedron. It's also cool as fuck to ride on top, as you command it to blow everything to Kingdom Come. Besides that, you can also find pieces of equipment hidden throughout the world, which offer additional buffs to your stats. These are placed in such a way that really take advantage of the movement options you can unlock as you go further into the game. For example, there are these massive structures that seem to come out of books in the sky, and all of them contain a secret piece of equipment on top of them. While a few of them might be easy to obtain, there is at least one that will definitely test your understanding of your abilities and how to use them to move throughout the world. You see, Gyromantia is not only used for attacking, as even casting the fireball on the air gets you the small boost that might just be what you need to cross a larger gap. Having that in mind, how do you acquire more Gyromantia? Well, besides the shop, which contains a few useful ones, each tower is associated with a quest that is unlocked when you pass the necessary height to trigger it. These then get recorded on your journal so that you know exactly what to do to complete it. They all reward you with new Gyromantia, and while I would like to highlight some of the more useful ones, they're all pretty good in their own right. It's also pretty cool how you can chain them together to traverse the world in style, or just gain enough momentum to get near a pesky trumpeter and dunk on that motherfucker all the way from the heavens. Hell, just to show you how crazy things can get, you can literally transmutate a chain gun that shoots erratic lime. When things start to go wrong, just remember that you can throw money at high fucking velocity and all of your problems will go away. Oh right, you also get tokens from interacting with the tower quests, which can then be used to upgrade individual traits of each Gyromantia. Yeah, those are really important, so don't forget to use them wisely. Do keep in mind that you can only have 6 Gyromantia skills equipped at once, and during the construction of the tower, you cannot change any of your equipment or abilities. I should also explain that you can get extra armaments for the BURGGEIST, because the game never directly states this. This is only confusing because the so-called Armalites look exactly the same as the purple polyhedrons, which makes sense, they also adhere to the same rules as those, but you might miss how each one of them has a unique design. This is only stated on the tutorial that pops up if you get near one, otherwise you will probably miss it completely. Of course, some of the ones you can get are much bigger than the available space on the BURGGEIST, and the solution for this is found atop these spiral towers, which reward you with further expansions to the foundation on where to put bigger and better armaments. On a more technical note, while it is certainly possible to use a controller, I would definitely recommend the use of a keyboard and mouse for this one, as the more precise aiming helps immensely for the later stages, where the erratic and intense nature of the game finally reveals itself. If you end up not connecting with the gameplay, but still want to see the story to the end by yourself, you can always change the difficulty to the easier setting, as the only thing you get locked out of are the achievements. While the game has 2 endings, it's better to say that there is an abridged one and a complete one. As expected, the complete ending requires that you get further involved with the events occurring throughout the world, and after meeting a certain character, it becomes clear if you have unlocked the conditions for the true ending. When you get the option to finally choose, I recommend just going straight for the true complete ending, as the other one is literally just an abridged version and you won't be missing out from anything extra. Even so, the last automatic save is before you proceed to the end, in case you want to continue to explore the world afterwards. While my final discussion point can technically be categorized under game design, it involves showing the final section, so if you want to save that for yourself, I recommend to stop watching for now, if you haven't already. The concept for the ending sequence as a climax for the story is great, and I can totally see how this moment was envisioned, but my first attempt at the final boss literally took me half an hour, because I was simultaneously trying to understand what the game wanted of me while trying to determine the boss attack patterns. While there are exceptions, it disappoints me when a game builds up its core gameplay just for the ending to have you doing something completely different, and in this case, the lack of polish almost ruins this grandiose moment. From a development standpoint, I understand that allocating more resources into something that the majority of players is probably not going to see is not a very good idea. This might seem ridiculous, but if you check the global stats on achievements or trophies for any game, it's clear that just a small portion of the players will ever finish their games. With that in mind, I am of the belief that if you have a really fun and interesting game, you're allowed to have a bad ending, be it from a story or a gameplay standpoint. It's not that you should, but sometimes you have to make concessions, and that is something I'm willing to give up. But the truth is that, just like Nine Souls, this moment went from a frustrating experience to a moment of pure clarity that felt rewarding once I stopped complaining and actually tried to learn what it was trying to teach me. Basically, you have an attack and a dodge, but the dodge can either be a neutral or a sidestep depending on additional input. You should be attacking at all times, as this increases your abhorrence meter, which after a certain amount allows you to parry an attack for massive damage. The problem here is that when you take damage, you lose a lot of abhorrence, and that can be frustrating. While the attacks might be hard to identify and react with the appropriate dodge, realize that all of his combos are based on a main combo that wants you to dodge like this: sideways, sideways, neutral, neutral, sideways. Any of his attacks that isn't the vertical one, you have to dodge with a neutral. The game will tell you when you should use the parry, so just keep going at it until you're able to do it. With this, I went from taking half an hour to a mere 2 minutes. This only proves that what some might consider bad gameplay might just be them not accepting what the game is trying to teach them. Even then, if you aren't good at this sort of rhythm gameplay, the game also allows you to drag your feet and hit the boss little by little because you can actually lose the fight here, so at least there's that option for those who need it. As an extra final point, I'm going to show the extra secret weapon that you can get, because it requires you to do the hardest thing in the game, and some people might not have the patience to do that. If you explore around enough, you might realize that there is a tower location that you can't access directly because it's surrounded by an impassable wall. In one of the sides there is a door that is actually made of the same material as the polyhedrons, so if you manage to do high enough damage to break it, you'll be presented with a colorful valley that unfortunately has the tower location at the bottom of it. If you don't realize what this means, it's that you have to build a tower right on the spot that funnels enemies from all the sides. And they are not fucking around here either, as this is the hardest tower of them all, so you're dealing with Muso levels of enemy waves while having to construct a tower that goes up to 4000 Norans. I have done this exactly twice after many failed attempts, and I still don't have a good strategy for it, besides being high enough level and praying that everything will be fine while absolutely raising the fuck out of the tower's base. If you manage to do it, the tower's quest will have you go to another secret place that also has a destructible wall, and after clearing the path, you'll be presented with a castle? It doesn't do anything and it occupies most of the BURGGEIST, so what's the deal? Well, if you upgrade it to the very last level, the castle can now do this. Oh baby, the sweet sound of revenge! Come now, you motherfuckers! How about I Godzilla your asses to dust? I do have to admit, I was slightly disappointed because with all of these artillery-based armaments, I almost expected for something absolutely ridiculous like calling upon a low-orbit ion cannon, but I guess this is cool too. It must be stated that this section is based on analysis often containing high speculative conjecture, so it should be ultimately classified as my own interpretation and not taken as a guaranteed fact. The main reason that makes the research on the fiction of BURGGEIST so difficult is the uncertain interjection with the real world and its similar events. Let's start by defining a common baseline here. The story centers around the no man's land of Aliskans, described as the ground zero for a war between the nations of Galacia and Deodisk, which allegedly started over a dispute regarding the ownership of the Aliskans forest. Lasting for over half a century, it eventually led to a standstill due to the sudden death of Childbert, the ruling warlord of Galacia. Despite the loss of their leader, the development of certain weapons by the Societas Periodiae gave Galacia the upper hand on the closing diplomacy agreements, while in reality both nations were just exhausted by the recent pandemic outbreak of Black Death. With this information, we can easily come to the conclusion that the world of BURGGEIST is based on the real world, specifically the European region, which is mentioned directly across several different documents. Black Death, as an important plot point, also solidifies further connections to real-life events, with Galacia also being a real ancient area in Anatolia, the peninsula where modern Turkey is located. This hypothesis can be supported by the presence of a lost marjoram ring in Aliscans. In the real world, marjoram is an herb indigenous to the Mediterranean, which include both Cyprus and Turkey. A diverging path then begins to appear as soon as you look further into other details, like the ruling warlord Childbirth. In BURGGEIST, he was the one who conquered all of the neighboring land that would ultimately form Galacia, but in real life, the only famous person with that name was a Frankish king. Furthermore, Childbirth is a French name with Germanic roots, which is more confusing because the opposing nation of Deodisk is also a Germanic word. So, what does this all mean? Unfortunately, I am neither versed or qualified to talk about geography, history, or linguistics, so I just hope someone else more knowledgeable on the topic is able to elucidate me on some sort of connection that I might be missing. Even so, let's ignore the specific minutiae and look at the bigger picture. If this is still the true historic Galacia, then what is Deodisk? In reality, Deodisk was the term used to refer to language of the general populace, specifically the ones used during the Frankish Empire, and after many linguistic shenanigans, it eventually led to Deutsch, which is the modern word for German. It is then safe to assume that Deodisk refers to the region where modern Germany is now located, or at least somewhere close to it. With the two main nations more or less defined and positioned, what is Aliscan supposed to be in actuality? This is somehow complicated to explain, but Aliscons is a fictional place in a medieval poem of the same name where a disastrous battle took place, presumably based on Alisca, which is a Roman necropolis just outside of the French town of Aul. Supporting this theory are the diverse trinkets that you can find throughout the game, which serve as equipable items. Some of these are directly named in French, or even refer to plant life that is indigenous to France. In a grossly simplified summary, we got fictional Germans going to war with fictional Turks over some fictional fantasy land in France. Just wanted to clarify that part, as this only gets more complicated when you get into further details. With the land of BURGGEIST largely defined, the next step is trying to connect the fiction with the reality by establishing the age it takes place in and compare it for discrepancies between advancements in technology. The Black Death should place it around the 14th century, which is supported by the style of illustrations used for the tutorial documents, arcing back to the medieval ages. Plus the fact that things like paper are still considered a valuable commodity seems to further support that. In terms of technology, it is hard to establish at what level the world is actually in, because the game is mostly focused on a wasteland, which only houses leftover ruins from the war and warped natural phenomena. This leaves the highest point you can use as a reference to be the Societas Periodiae, which is documented to be a mathematical society from Galacia, of which the protagonist was a part of in the past. From its codex description, we can ascertain several things. That mathematics is a popular vocation used in a diverse range of fields, from logistics to artillery calculations, and that their society focused on the study of the occult, which cost them their reputation during the war, despite later improving their standing to the point of gaining strong patronage from Galacia's ruling elite. First of all, why did the Society for Mathematics study the occult? You might be surprised that they share a lot of in common, as they are both fields that mainly deal with the study of abstract forms and how they influence the world. Even then, to employ the usage of such entities called demons leaves a large gap between fiction and reality, so let's consider how height is measured in here. There is never any mention of either metric or imperial systems, so it's safe to say that their mathematics are completely different to their real-life counterpart, so one can't base themselves on common preconceptions of reality for this topic. It's also important to note that it's specifically stated that the concept of a demon can be both applied to the common interpretation of a folklore creature or as a part of a thought experiment. All of this can also be applied to real life, and the problem is that, somewhere along the line, these so-called demons turn from concept into tangible entities. Scholars have divided this into meta-demons, which are those who reside in the mind or perception, and hypodemons, for those who inhabit the body. Many cases of exceptions and intermediate forms have also been observed, and the only shared trait between them seems to be of how the skin of the host turns to pale white, while interrupting any further physical change. And now that we have a better sense of the world, let's look at the story that BURGGEIST presents and explain the rest as we go along. It starts with a protagonist named Ignis recalling his past, of how he fought in the Alaskan's War, despite not understanding the reason behind it, as it had started long before he was born. He eventually was discharged from the military for injury and seemingly invited to the Societas Periodiae almost immediately. Considering how he was able to join a mathematical society despite never attending university should be enough of a clue for the state of the group at the time, forced to recruit all of the sufficiently competent people that they could get. Like previously stated, they got a bad reputation during the war because their main method for weapons R&D was by delving into the occult side of the world and using demons as a medium. It's not clear what that implies specifically, but Ignis was involved in performing certain tests on human subjects. Of note between all of that was Subject 220, a woman who he quickly became close to despite the nature of their relation. In recognition for his achievements in the society, the woman named Lucille was given back her freedom, and they will later go on to marry an adopted child named Mituala, who was also a previous test subject. The three of them will go on to live a peaceful life together, despite Lucille's frail state caused by a lifelong incurable disease, until one certain day where she inexplicably became petrified, peacefully sleeping in a dream that she could not wake up from. Years would pass as Ignis spends his life looking for a solution, no longer a member of the society. It was then that he noticed Ituala communicating with something beyond writing, some sort of invisible entity which they came to call Axiom. After several exchanges, the entity declared that for Lucille to be released, a tower that reached the skies had to be constructed. Despite religion never being brought up or defined in any clear way, they seem to be powerful enough to be enforcing such laws, like forbidding the construction of structures higher than their own church, which becomes the impetus for Ignis to build a tower in Alaskans, where no one else dares to take direct responsibility for the current state of the land. After arriving, Ignis meets up with Gwenahel, his old mentor from the society who he still holds a strong bond of friendship with. Despite never mentioning it directly, he is possessed by the hypodemon Masterman, contained in the extra arm planted on his right elbow. He gives him an amicability box, a tool that allows for high-precision communication between individuals, which Ignis used to be in constant contact with Ituala. As for some undisclosed reason, Axiom warned them that she shouldn't move farther than 276 Norrons away from Lucille, or something bad would happen. This is how the armaments on the top of the BURGGEIST actually move, as it is the work of Ituala, who controls them with the power of manipulating objects at a distance, something she developed as a byproduct of the repeated exchanges with Axiom. It's also explained that the BURGGEIST just appeared one day during the initial attempts to build a tower, but contrary to the rest of the abhorrers, it didn't do anything besides following Ignis's orders. Before you are set free into the world, there is an indirect mention to what happened in the beginning cutscene, in case you missed its significance. Ignis actually cut off the arm of Ituala and transplanted it into himself, but the reason behind it is further explored at a later part, so I'll leave it for now. You are now free to explore Alaskans in any way you want, so I'll go through each unique quest in the same order that I did in my first playthrough. While resting in the tower located at Chef Frontier, Ignis meets a man in a full suit of armor who asks for his help, as he appears to be stuck inside of it. He exclaims that he doesn't remember for how long he has been like this, talking about the war like it was a recent event. After analyzing the armor, Ignis notices an inscription that might indicate that it is related to a demon. The next time they meet, he realizes that he forgot to check something, and after confirming his suspicions, he informs the man that the suit of armor is completely empty inside. Ignis then advises the man to leave Aliskans, as the place is known for a strange weather phenomena called the Tempest of Mercury, which is capable of destroying him in his current state. This is actually an event that can randomly occur while building the tower, which makes all the horrors considerably stronger in exchange of giving you infinite Gyromantia energy. With the intent of comforting him, Ignis reminds him that he now possesses an immortal body at the same time that the Black Death is spreading throughout the land, and that he should take advantage of his condition to help those in need, saying that he should fill his hollow armor with the gratitude of others so that he might one day find himself. Despite being overwhelmed by the news of his condition, he accepts the advice, willing to give it a try, if not just to take his mind off this predicament. After he departs, Itwala questions if it was the right choice to uphold the truth from the man, with Ignis revealing that his body was in fact still present, and it was the armor that was keeping him alive from some deep mortal wound he must have received during the Aliskans War. The encounter ends with both of them hoping that by directing him in the right path, the man will find more happiness than he had lost until now. In the tower at the top of the fortification in Erstvoord, Ignis is able to meet his old mentor once again. They exchange some pleasantries about the progress of his objective, but not much more, as Ignis doesn't want to bother him any further. In return, he asks about his search for the book of a certain individual named Paulin. Gwenahel reveals that the book is called 26 Reciprocities, but the situation isn't quite so simple because the book appears to be completely blank. He asks him what it comes to mind when thinking of the number 26, and Ignis humors him by saying that it is the number of playing cards in a deck by color, but also the smallest number that is in a palindrome to have a square that turns it into one. For those who don't remember, a palindrome is a sequence that can be read the same in either direction. Gwenahel explains further that if you were to flip certain pages back and forth 26 times, something will happen, but all of this requires a second book. Obsessed with his research, Palin carried both books with him to the battlefield, which happens to be exactly in Erstvoord, where his artillery unit ended up getting ambushed, causing one of the books to be lost forever. This causes Ignis to reminisce over his service days, when he once saw Paulin picking up white primulas to bring back with him to Galacia. When he spoke to him, asking if they were for his research, he simply replied, "They are for my wife." According to the messenger who brought back the surviving book, a petal was found between the pages, in which Ignis uses as a clue to find the other missing book, located near a vast field of flowers. Returning with the missing book, they go through the necessary steps, but nothing seems to happen. Until... After being imparted with inner knowledge, Gwenahel comments that it's probably a demon function and that Ignis should assimilate it. Although never explained directly, demon functions are part of the formula used in gyromantia, which allow for the transformations to occur within the inscribed circle. The reason Ignis can summon all types of fire from his hand is because he has this inscribed directly on his palm. Despite neither of them knowing what is the deal with the man in the hole, Gwenahel recognizes some similarities to the ancients from the books he has read before. Having completed his duty, Gwenahel takes his leave with the books, as he reminds Ignis that learning is a constant process that never ends. While staying at the tower in the middle of Denar's forest, a strange girl riding 2 brooms breaks inside, presenting herself as Uskis, a witch that is impressed with Ignis' abilities, so she asks him to teach her magic. When asked back as to why she seeks to learn magic, she begins to explain that her father sold her family to witch hunters. Despite not being able to recognize her mother from the rest of the charred remains, she did find her grandmother's head screwed on a stick, so she brought it along with her. While reaffirming her promise to bring vengeance to all who did her wrong, Ignis reminds her that witch hunters exist in staggering numbers, and that this is not bound to end well. He also takes the opportunity to explain that his magic is not something that can be taught to others, as there are restrictions on use. Arriving at a standstill, she decides to just keep observing him in the meantime, in hopes of at least learning something. Later on, the head of the girl's grandmother begins speaking to Ignis, who is surprised to see a talking head. The woman named Ali Jun asks him to stop the young girl from seeking revenge, and in exchange, she will share the knowledge of how to fly like the young girl, further explaining that it can probably be converted into a method that Ignis can use. Worried about the witch hunters that are near to the area, Ignis decides to take the initiative and pay them a visit before things get out of hand. But when he arrives, all he finds is a hanged man holding a letter. Addressed to Uskis, it explains that the day when the witch hunters came to their village, it was a choice for everyone dying, or her who was gone to pick up herbs, to survive. The man then chose to side with the witch hunters to keep looking out for her. Hearing about the witch flying in 2 brooms, he came back to this land to make sure it was her, and after confirming it, he dug up a corpse from a grave, who he made to look like a witch before beating her face beyond recognition, as a way to trick the witch hunters by declaring that he managed to kill the girl that they've been looking for. The letter ends by explaining that the witch hunters won't be coming around for a while, and that now it's time for him to go, so that he can apologize to the girl's family. After Ignis buries the hanged man, he delivers the letter to Uskis, who after reading it, continues to wish for revenge, but that she shall disregard them for the time being, which Ignis takes as a good enough concession. At the tower on Hemorrhoiden Hill, a mysterious girl introduces herself by way of small talk, which eventually has Ignis respectfully ask if she is really human. Interested in the peculiar case happening in front of him, he notes that it's not the first time he has seen abhorrers take on the shape of humans, although having a conversation with one is definitely a first. They both begin theorizing that she is probably just mimicking human actions like all the other abhorrers, and this is just a particularly unique outcome. Ignis then takes the opportunity to ask why the abhorrers only come out to attack when a tower is being constructed, which appears to be a hive mind type situation, where they all know that if the construction is not halted, there will be trouble, confirming that it's not the tower itself, but the act of building. That is also why the ruins of the war are not affected by any of this. The girl-shaped abhorrer then explains that she did try to come to the tower sooner, but she tumbled down a hill and by the time she arrived, the raid had ended. Ignis finds it weird that while horrors usually disappear after the construction stops, she is still there, but it appears that not all horrors follow the same strict rules. The next time they meet, she proceeds to ask Ignis a question, but when he interjects that perhaps she is wondering where the rest of her head went, she gets surprised because she didn't realize she was missing it until now. Considering how she tumbled down a hill, it's time for Ignis to go look for it, and although he finds it, it's only one half, with the other half being back at the shop, forcing him to buy it. After that, she just pops her head back in and finally remembers that she is Herzlide, and that she is looking for her brother Sterno, although she's not sure if he is an abhorrer as well. With the feeling that he's somewhere in Aliskans, Ignis promises to keep an eye out for him, as they go on their own separate ways. During his stay in the tower at the top of Mount Gelwas, Ignis meets an eccentric character who is curious about the structure. Presenting himself as Gelud, he offers some belladonna berries as a token of their recently found friendship, but Ignis politely declines, so Gelud just eats them right away with no hesitation. Despite warning him to not eat them, he just gobbles them all up while going on about some kind of onion universe, and now he's interested in climbing to the top of the tower when it's finished. But when you come back the next time, he is on the floor, motionless, until he simply wakes up from being dead. Back to his usual pace, he ponders how he hasn't offered anything in exchange for climbing the tower, so in the meantime, he asks Ignis to pick up some acacia and offer it to a nearby shrine, explaining how it is some sort of rite of passage. After disappearing in a blink of an eye, Ignis reaches the conclusion that he can't be human, but even then, he goes through the ritual, which has him running on a straight line to the other side of the map. When Ignis arrives, Gelud shows him the treasure of his family, which apparently is strongly influenced by Venus. He then goes on how his family got embroiled in the Aliskans War, and how they got completely annihilated while trying to decide which nation to side with, while he fled from the land and his responsibilities, traveling to many places in search of a way to restore his family back to glory. While carrying around that axe, he realized that it held spiritual power, which somehow changed his constitution. He also shares that the power of celestial heavenly bodies increases the higher their altitude is, but assures Ignis that he only wants to climb the tower to experience beauty that he has never seen before, finally offering the axe before jumping away, never to be seen again. Inside the tower at the end of vault canopies, a mysterious person appears out of nowhere to complement the construction of the tower, thinking aloud as to why someone would want to build something like that, especially with the aid of monsters. Despite being asked who he is, he explains that he can't reveal his identity, although he can recognize that the cape that Ignis wears is from a certain society, showing just how resourceful he can be. The mysterious man then reveals that he was sent to Aliskans by a certain organization to investigate strange phenomena, which he has definitely found. The problem is that he isn't sure if the organization should be aware of such a thing, claiming it to be a dangerous substance or area that is expanding over time, so he asks Ignis to go take a look as a second opinion. Going north of the Denner's Forest, there is a cave which contains some fucked up shit, which not even Ignis knows what to make of it. The investigator then shows that the impact of things is amplified within a certain proximity to it, but he refuses to research further in case something went wrong. The problem here is that the phenomena is expanding and it might collapse the entire cave at any time, but he also doesn't believe that the organization is equipped to deal with such a thing. Deciding to take on the job, Ignis goes back to the shop to buy some paper for a transmutation circle, which he uses to shrink it down and shift his position, turning it into a safe, holdable trinket. When asked about what he will do with it now, he throws the question right back to Ignis, asking if he can use it effectively, which Ignis shows some reserve about being the one to safekeep it. The investigator then explains that no matter his choice, the outcome won't be favorable, but he believes that at the very least, it will be in good hands if left to Ignis. Without ever presenting himself, the investigator reveals his face and then disappears. This is an interesting side quest because it provides insight into several different things. One of them is how the transmutation of the gyromantia actually works. It appears that Ignis uses it to transport the original item somewhere else until he requires it, which must mean that he's keeping everything that he uses somewhere, even if it's an abstract place. The question then is where and how, but unfortunately we don't have enough material to go further into such details. Finally, the mask that the mysterious individual uses is mighty similar to the ones used by the Abhorrers. Does this mean the organization is using masks shaped like the creatures in some sort of symbolic meaning? Or are the Abhorrers just dead members of the organization? Unfortunately, I don't have enough material to support this question either. While exploring, you might come across a certain massive structure suspended in the air. If you have enough gyromantia to make it over there, you'll discover that it's called the Margrave Tower. Proceeding inside, Ignis finds a kid sitting alone, that when asked what he's doing there, he replies that he's helping the mad snake with primality testing, which causes Ignis to have the most sensible reaction and instantly turn around to leave.
Fuck this shit, I'm out.
The kid then interrupts him by remarking over his endeavors of building a tower by order of some meta demon, suggesting Ignis to take a seat so that they can talk. The kid introduces himself as Margrave and then asks Ignis if he's a member of the Colossal Society. As he is still cautious of who this person is, Ignis ignores the question, which in turn has Margrave revealed to him how he's also a demon researcher, but from the opposing nation of Deodisk, to which he is quick to add that with the war long gone, those petty rivalries don't matter anymore. He then just straight up reveals that he is the one creating the horrors by fiddling with the soil and the environment of Aliskans. He has been doing this specifically to devalue the land, as he doesn't want any other war to happen here for quite a while. Ignis, as calm as ever, asks what would happen if he kindly asked him to stop doing that, but Margrave says that he can't at the moment, expressing how there is no choice until this primally test reaches a conclusion. Confused by all of this talk, Ignis asks what he is talking about, to which the kid seems to be surprised that he can't see him, pointing to the attached arm that clearly doesn't belong to him. Margrave then tells him to do a circle with his hands, which reveals how some strange entity was just beside them all of this time. This is Primschlange, the meta-demon residing on Margrave's mind. His codex entry later reveals that he possesses powerful abilities like altering the geology and terrain of the Aliskans region and resurrecting the dead as abhorrers. In exchange for this power, Margrave lets him wander around doing something not even he understands. He explains that he just keeps writing 1 over and over and checking if it's a prime number or not. He then clarifies his previous offhand comment of how a child's hand is necessary to see meta-demons, and then doesn't elaborate further. This puts into question the real reason as to why Ignis transplanted Itwala's arm into him. Was it an order by Axiom, or was it so simply to aid him in the construction of the tower? I honestly can't come up with a sensible explanation. Seeing how it's white, I assumed it was used as a host for Axiom, but later points contradict this. Anyway, Margrave then reveals as well that the colossal walking fortress parked outside is actually Childbirth, which Ignis calls bullshit on it, but Margrave swears that his meta-demon told him. It also told him that someone broke out of control, of how Childbirth used meta-demons for war, and now that is related to why he ended up dying mysteriously at the onset of the Aliskans' war. In the end, Ignis asked Margrave why he just revealed all of this, which he explains that he does half in jest, and the other half is because he's looking for his family. Not even one step outside, and I realize who he really is, so I go right back in, causing Ignace to call out to Margrave by uttering the name Sterno, the brother that Erzelide has been looking for. Despite the touching family reunion, he realizes that he was too late, but she doesn't mind it, because at least they were able to meet once more. In a confusing turn of events, they declare that she will repay Ignace for his help by being used as the catalyst to restore Shalbert's memories. Ignace doesn't think that is the right thing to do and asks them to reconsider. But as Margrave reminds him, after abhorrers complete their objective, they disappear, and with the wish of seeing her brother granted, she doesn't have much time. This moment is even more depressing when you realize that the entire reason as to why Margrave decided to be the host to this demon was to gain the power to revive the dead, and the game never mentions this in any way. It's just something that you can either realize yourself or never find out. She probably was a casualty of the Aliscan's war, so he just kept on reviving everyone who died here until he found his sister once again, fully knowing how all of that effort was just for a temporary, fleeting moment, just for a chance to properly say goodbye to his sister. Childbert, now with his recovered memories, is kind of pissed off that Ignace has been using him all of this time for his own convenience. But for now, he pardons him, which Ignace couldn't care less about. Margrave then asks if the metademon that killed him was one who communicates via writing, which he quickly confirms it was. He also explains that it was Shalbert's satellite, his personal mathematician and astrologer, who managed to defect to Geodisc soon after his death, and later would share this information. Shalbert recalls of how he planned on using metademons for his own gain, and one of those was Axiom. He intended to use his precise prophecies for war, but Shalbert felt an ominous sense of danger from it, and by trying to trace Axiom's intentions, it seemingly triggered it to kill him. When asked what is Axiom's goals, he begins to explain how the heavens are composed of layers like an onion, with the movements of celestial bodies like Mars and Mercury affecting the Earth, and Axiom wants to bring the onion universe under his own control. But to achieve that, he needs to enter within the range of the heavens, which is why he needs a tower reaching the skies to be constructed. As for why he wants to control the onion universe, none of the characters present can stipulate his reasoning, as they surmise that he is beyond human comprehension. To stop him, Shalbert planned to use the ancient demon function, pseudo-son of Odobutu, which existed even before Axiom was born. But trying to complete the formula is what actually triggered Axiom to kill Shalbert. So to see this plan through to the end, Ignace will be the one to finish the formula, while Shalbert will stall Axiom for time, as by currently existing from the powers of Primschlange, he is technically part of a demon and so is able to face Axiom directly. Only caring for saving his wife, Ignace will only consider helping in this endeavor after Axiom completes his part of the contract. Margrave also states that he doesn't particularly care about this whole onion universe business, and Shalbert, only being a temporary soul tethered to this place, also cares very little besides exacting vengeance upon the entity that killed him. In the end, BURGGEIST is about three dudes who can barely care about the possible repercussions of a demon taking over control of the fabric of reality, because they are not really sure if that is a bad thing. After an arduous battle at Salina Purpurosa, a woman appears to ask Ignace if he is also searching for the sword of Borogema, to which he admits not knowing what that is, or is simply feigning ignorance for the sake of convenience. She then explains how it is a sword that appears in folklore, but there is a rumor that says it really exists, then declaring that she is searching for it and that she won't give it up to him. Nevertheless, she then proceeds to ask him for help, which Ignis retorts with how he doesn't have time for something that might not even exist, but he is willing to hear her out depending on what she can offer him. Completely on her own pace, she asks if he is from some prestigious noble family, only to get disappointed with the answer because she is looking to marry up on life. Ignis then profiles her by pointing out how she doesn't have anything to trade for marriage, so she is looking for the legendary sword to bargain with. She is doing all of this because all the men in her family have died, so she is trying to do good for her family name, despite her attempts being fruitless since then. She then mentions how she has a lead on the sword's location, but when walking around she saw nothing of it, leaving Ignis to take a second look at it. But before departing, they finally exchange names, with her presenting herself as the Baroness Eonor Eleanor. After arriving at the location and destroying a wall that reveals a hidden castle, Eonor explains that the tale of BURGGEIST is a story about the fight against the invaders, which includes a sword that emanated a ray of light that swept all of its enemies. Despite searching all around the area, she is disappointed to not find anything once again, only for Ignis to finally point out if the tip of the castle isn't the sword she's been looking for this entire time, as she jokes back that if that was the case, it would take a giant to use such a colossal thing, quickly coming to realize that the folktale never mentioned the size of who used it in the first place. Lost in the unexpected conclusion to her quest, Ignis offers her a piece of advice, that it would be wiser to settle down with someone humble than try to get into the often precarious life of nobility, which somehow has her yet again ask him what he thinks about her, despite Ignis' constant reminders that he is already a married man. Before departing, she offers him the ownership of the sword, which he is quick to point out how the sword wasn't even hers to begin with. At the tower of Vortexfelsen, a man named Marius joins Ignis for a moment's rest. The man explains that he moved out of town to escape the Black Death, but as soon as the others joined him, they began having issues with water pollution. Believing it would be the best to live far away from others until the plague subsides, he explained that he has found an abandoned house, but fears that it might be a hiding spot for bandits. Offering to check it out, Ignis goes to the remote cabin in the middle of the woods to the west, where beautiful trees of crimson foliage grow in abundance. Entering the small cabin, he finds that the house is covered in weird chunks of meat that strangely enough don't produce any kind of odor. Trying to figure out what happened here, Ignis finds a letter that warns anyone who reads it about the man in white, explaining that whatever it is not human, and it turns people into chunks of meat after coming into direct contact with them. It also advises against running away from it, and to never mention what is inside the house, as while you can trick it temporarily, you can never escape for the rest of your life. By asking Axim about it, it's explained that the man in white is some kind of cataclysm in celestial astrology, probably caused by the changes on Mars, and that to truly drive him away, one just has to use black flies. While Litwala prepares this, Ignis meets up with the man once again, and following the instructions from the letter, Ignis explains that everything seems okay with the house. The man then asks if he can meet up with him in the house, and that he can go ahead while he packs his belongings to join him. Arriving at the house, Ignis releases a swarm of black flies, which seems to drive away the man in white before he can even be seen again. To which Ignis notes that it doesn't feel right to let loose such a thing back into the world. To reassure him, Itwala points out that soon enough, the man in white will get tired and disappear, as that is just the type of cataclysm that he is. After the Colossal Tower is finally finished, and Ignis takes Lucille and Etoile to the top, Axiom declares that Lucille will soon be free. And this is when you can make a choice for which ending to pick, either the abridged one or the complete one. Ultimately, chasing the absolute truth, Ignis chooses to face Axiom using the same gesture to finally realize the demon upon his cognitive perception. After asking Etoile to protect Lucille for the moment, Ignis confronts Axiom by first asking what are his true intentions, to which he admits wanting to control the Onion universe, because, as he puts it, an incorrect proof was made about what surrounds us. When asked what will happen when he obtains control, he states that the answer is beyond Ignis' comprehension and that the reason for that is also beyond him. Not being in favor of approving something he doesn't completely understand, diplomacy is put aside and childbirth is called upon to punch the conceptual shit out of Axiom. Fuck this Gaia and their ridiculous trillions of damage. The coolest shit I ever seen is sparing an attack by dividing by zero, creating a mathematical fallacy of such caliber that it damages an abstract demon. Even then, this is not enough to destroy Axiom, so Ignis is still forced to use the complete formula of the ancient demon function, which is stated to bring chaotic, conceptual incineration, therefore deleting the subject from ever existing. Despite always acting as a mighty, arrogant leader, Childbirth shows a final hint of compassion towards his old satellite, asking Margrave to tell her that in the end, it was all for a noble cause. Bathed in the comfort of a benevolent sun, Ignis reflects on how he'll able to finally spend some quiet time together with his family after all of this, returning the arm to Etoile and getting some much needed rest. As promised, Lucille wakes up like nothing ever happened, glad to see both Ignis and Etoile once again, despite thoughts of her lifelong sickness still lingering on their minds. Everything is okay once again. Something which I really don't understand is the final moment after destroying Axiom, where Ignis asks him why he now seeks permission, to which Axiom explains that the rules have changed because he was seen. He then throws Ignis a book, who after opening it remarks how Axiom wanted him to become a demon with that. The book has the symbol of the sun on the cover, which is used similarly on other places too, but I don't understand what is being revealed here. Is the incorrect proof of what surrounds them explained there? If so, what caused this change of mind from Axiom? Did he just realize he was going to disappear and decided to show his cards at the last second, in hopes that Ignis continues his work? This gets even more confusing because if you complete all the possible towers to the max height, a door to the temple in the beginning will open, revealing the deity from the previous game of the developer, Gideon. Here you can use the power of the pseudo-son of Odubuntu to delete completed towers as many times as you like, so that you can continue playing if you so wish. Gideon is the Irish word for sun. Is Gideon the name of the deity, the land, or just the concept of the sun in this reality? Is Odubuntu the name of the land of the previous game? Is the sun just straight up a demon? What the fuck does any of these mean? Seeing I will probably never get an answer to this, I want to hear my crazy theory. And by crazy I mean just absolutely fucking nuts, to the point where I'm not even going to try to bother to support this with evidence. I think that the major breakthrough from the Societas Periodia was the equivalent to a nuclear bomb, and that when they dropped it during the Aliscans War, it vaporized everything and everyone into the ground, which caused the environment to change. The Codex entry for Heretic Lime states that it is a substance only found in Aliscans, formed from soil changes after the war, and that it has a particularly high affinity with the power of manipulating objects which is why it's used as the primary building material for the tower. It's highly possible that the erratic lime is just a mix of the ground together with the physical remains of everyone that got blasted by the nuke. This implies that what Margrave has been doing with the power of the Primschlange is grabbing this human putty and make some fucked up shit to stop the tower construction. If you want to go the extra schizophrenic step, you can even consider the entire region of Aliskans to be similar to Silent Hill, in terms of how it's a place where broken people end up while trying to find themselves, attracted by powerful magic that warps the reality within it. Metademons might also be important for the plot. If you ended up watching this to the end, despite having an interest to play it someday, please consider grabbing a copy in the near future. BURGGEIST is an incredible game that simply appeared one day without much fanfare, and I believe it deserves so much more than that. If this video is able to bring more attention to this game, no matter how much, then to me, all the effort behind it was worth it. Thank you for watching. It was a pleasure having you here.